just a myriad of questions that had to be answered. Today we look back 200 years later, 150 years, and we see all those answers right here in the Central Washington Agricultural Museum. Machinery they built, equipment they constructed, ideas they brought forward, tractors they used, every possible type of agricultural implement that you can think of. Can you imagine cutting lumber before there was a sawmill? People on the misery whip, standing one man up, one man down, cutting off each board one at a time? Almost impossible.
Yeah. Somehow.
Can I see this?
Well, you could also do you could do this thing to show.
Yeah.
Yoga.
Subtle.
I haven't been doing yoga for
Subtle.
Camera's rolling.
Good morning, everybody. Lori Jenkins, Speaker of the House. I'm here with Monica Stoney, our floor leader today. Just a couple opening comments. I wanted to reflect a little bit. This last weekend was Town Hall weekend. Our members saw record numbers of people at our town halls, including me. We had nearly 500 people at our town hall meeting in Tacoma. I think our 42nd district members had 600 people at their town hall, and just a lot of people coming out. Thematically, what we heard in most districts were people being driven in large part because of concerns around the federal government and what the federal government is doing and the harm that they were worried about happening to people, whether it's layoffs of federal workers, whether it's cuts to Medicaid or Social Security, cuts to the Environmental Protection Agency, all of those kinds of things. People heard throughout their districts, with constituents really asking, what can we do to help? What can we do to stop this? And understanding that state elected officials only have so much that we can do, but interested in us doing as much as we can to help on those things. And I had that very much in my district. I think in addition, a lot of feedback from people focused on our state budget and the deficit that we are in, and people asking us not to adopt an all-cuts budget, but to take a more balanced approach and to make sure that we adopt progressive revenue in order to make sure that we're not cutting and eliminating programs that save people's lives. So that was kind of the theme of many of our town halls, if not all of our town halls, in some way, shape, or form. I think this week we're looking at later this afternoon, we're going to get our economic revenue forecast. Our budget teams, both in the House and the Senate, will take that information in and to make kind of final adjustments in our budget based on what our proposed budgets based on what that forecast is. Our hopes, are that it remains steady, but we'll see it too, whether it drops or it increases. What we've seen thus far is that it's actually actions at the federal level that are probably driving our economic revenue forecast more than anything. So that is, of course, a worrisome thing for us. And we're hearing great Senate bills in the House, and excited to be hearing them. But instead of talking more about that, people can ask about it, and I'll send it over to Senator Peterson.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. So, as usual, agreeing wholeheartedly with Speaker Jenkins, we had our own town hall in the 43rd, and I can say that in common was the desire for progressive revenue. My constituents were less interested in a balanced approach and more interested in a budget that had no cuts. So it wasn't a very popular message for them to hear that there was going to need to be some balance in that. But it was interesting to me as we debriefed in caucus yesterday about the town hall experience for folks, whether it was a solid blue district like the 43rd or the 27th, or whether it was a more purpley district like the 45th, or a very swingy district like the 42nd, the message was the same across all of them. People are extremely frustrated with what's going on at the federal level, very worried about the way that might bleed into our world here, and on high alert about any parallels that might develop between how we approach our budget and how the federal government is approaching its budget. Substantial concern about making sure that we treat our state employees well, substantial concern about any reductions to services that people depend on, whether that's Medicaid or public schools. So, in all of those ways, a lot of energy, a lot of anxiety. And I think it's interesting. We got the we got one of the components of the revenue forecast, which was the actual collections in February, which were up more than $50 million over what they expected. Collections in January were similarly, tax collections were higher than anticipated in the last forecast. And so as one of my budget folks said to me, this is probably in the last 10 years the time when there's the biggest gap between what's actually happening in terms of collections and the storm clouds on the horizon self-inflicted by the federal government in terms of the possibility of trade wars and recession and stagflation. And so it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with the revenue forecast based on all of those clouds on the horizon. I am hopeful that in the end it'll be kind of a push and we'll be able to move the budgets out quickly. So anyway, look forward to your questions.
Can we just start on the budget?
Oh, and I'm sorry, Terry, before I say, for the first time, our Deputy Majority Leader, Senator Lovelet, is here with me today. So really happy to have her along as well. Thank you.
One technical question. The budget, when are the House and Senate releasing them? Same day, next week, what day?
Our plan is to release the House budget on next Monday, the 24th.
And the Senate also on the 24th.
Will that include transportation that day or not?
Transportation will come out the same day. Yeah.
As well. Well, capital may not. But
Capital the following week,
Yeah.
I think, is the plan.
yeah.
And my other question was, you met with the governor last evening. Highlights, what were some of the topics? Were they headline issues? Were they policy? Were they relationships? What were you talking about?
I think we talked about all of those things. I guess relationships get built as we talk about policy, both revenue reductions, budget, a lot of conversations about budget.
On that, we have got a good sense of where you folks are landing on the revenue side of things. The governor has used the word last resort. We're not going to tax our way out of this thing. He said repeatedly, are we headed for a special session, gridlock? Is he going to budge on that? Are you going to budge? How do you see this working out, knowing that you do have the majority in both the House and Senate and in the governor's office?
I think we have large alignment on the idea that we owed it to the taxpayers to start with a detailed scrub of the budget. And that's what we do every year, but we have been doing that work for the last, really 3 months, but particularly during session for the last 9 weeks. So we have come up with a package of reductions. We've passed some of those already out of the Senate. So before cutoff, we took a major set of reductions to the Fair Start for Kids Act, for example, in terms of planned increases, and with a lot of pain for a lot of folks, but understanding that we needed to demonstrate that we were willing to make reductions first. And so I think in that way we've been aligned with the governor. Nobody has been able to or wanted to come up with enough reductions to resolve the entire shortfall with reductions. And so, I think the budget proposals that you'll see will include revenue and to make a balanced approach. And so, we've started having those conversations with the governor. And I think, from my perspective, the major point of the meeting yesterday was for us to give him a little bit of a glimpse into how we were thinking about the problem. And he'll get more details, obviously, as we get closer to the release. This is Speaker Jenkins has been through this before, but for Governor Ferguson and for me, this is the first time doing this together. So there's, it's just a certain amount of practice that it takes in terms of communication lines being open to get it right.
Are you sensing he's open from that conversation to revenue? I think you said, Senator Peterson, early in the session, he was kind of open to a tax on bigger business, some of those. how would you characterize his openness to a balanced approach?
Well, one, I would say you should talk to the governor about where he's at on things. I would say he's been very open in our dialogues to conversing about everything, to hearing from us on every topic. So he has been open to that. I think, we do have, we both have a deadline, which is sine die on the 27th, but this is the kind of thing that you have to actually take a step-by-step process to get through, right? Both the Senate and the House will release budgets, operating budgets and transportation budgets. We will need to move them off of our floors, and all of those things help us move toward resolving differences between the House and the Senate, and also help the governor's office see where the center point is on that also. And then as we get into conference and start talking about those differences even more, those will work their way out. But I don't have any ability to jump to the end and tell you what that will be yet, other than knowing what the end date is. And we don't feel at this point like we're in a position to say we are not going to finish by sine die. In fact, it's the opposite. We're moving along at a good pace to be able to do that.
And with really good communication. I guess the other thing that I would add is, although the U.S. Congress seems to have forgotten that it is responsible for the purse, we are very conscious of the fact that it is the legislature's responsibility to create the budget and to send that off to the governor. And so he's an important participant in that process. Ultimately, he has to sign it. So we're trying to bring him along. But as the speaker said, first we got to have 13 votes in Ways and Means, and then we got to have 25 votes on the floor for the budget and the revenue plan. Then the same.
I just have to have a couple more.
Yeah, a few more, and then we have to have the votes on the same thing. So there are a lot of steps in the process, and I think it's great that we have lines of communication open with the governor to make sure that we're not wildly off base with him.
Are you planning to meet with him more regularly?
Oh, we'll meet with him as regularly as we need to. I expect that now that we're into the budget phase of things, that our meetings will happen more regularly. But very, very open to meeting whenever we need to.
A couple questions. One, I did not realize this until the Republicans mentioned it this morning. I guess Jeff Hawley's bill did not survive the cutoff on the police, the $100 million for police. Is that going to be saved in some other form? I've heard there's another bill floating through that would have the same thing, and I also know when you do the budgets, you can revive anything you want during the budget season. Is that $100 million for police officers? Is that going to be part of your master plan when you finally unveil your budgets?
So, as is often the case, particularly as we approach cutoff, we're watching very closely what the House is working on and what we're working on. The House passed Representative Entenmann's bill. Is that 14?
It's 2015.
2015.
Yeah.
House Bill 2015, which contained that concept. And so we did not feel the need to move Senator Hawley's bill, given that one had already come over from the House. I think we are absolutely going to continue as part of the budget process discussing public safety generally and the governor's desire in particular to have a grant program for police.
Trying to pin you down. Is $100 million going to survive all this intact?
Do you have your predicted time?
Yeah, I didn't bring my predict pen, John, but I don't think we can predict any of that. We can't predict dollar amounts right now on anything. We have a bill that's alive that holds that has the capacity for grants to local law enforcement. We'll have to see. I mean, the revenue forecast will have an impact. The revenue that we adopt will have an impact. All of these things will have an impact on
the different spending priorities of the two bodies.
I think one of the additive great things about the Entman bill is that it actually authorizes local governments, it provides taxing authority for them to fund public safety, writ large. So beyond just law enforcement officers, which some counties, that's their highest priority. Other counties, they might want law enforcement officers and certain kinds of behavioral health teams to be able to fund those. So it provides some flexibility. So we're hoping that Rep. Entman's bill moves forward, but I think it's a more, it's quite good, robust thinking on how we move forward on this.
And sustainable.
Yeah.
I mean, we did pass a bill by Senator Slatter that is also an authorization for local governments. Because you have to ask yourself if a city hires a police officer in year 2, what happens in year 3, right? Where does the money come from to pay the ongoing salary of that police officer? I don't think we're talking about a surge where we have some more for a little bit and then no more after that. We are working. We have one of the new training facilities opening on Thursday up in Arlington, and the state has really stepped up to make sure that we're producing a good new crop of folks to address the workforce shortage that they have among peace officers. So the longer term question, as Speaker Jenkins was saying, was like, how do we set cities and counties up so that they're in a position to be able to employ these folks sustainably?
My other question, also a budget question. Okay, this is John Stang's own personal guess, and no one else is liable for it, but I am guessing that you will probably have some sort of taxes or new taxes or fees in your package. Have you ruled out any sort of taxes, and essentially the wealth tax, which the governor's not crazy about? I'll pin you down, Jamie. The far left really likes that tax. And
not just the far left.
Yeah.
In fact, I think every public poll that I've seen on that has had it well over 60%, many over 70%. So it's not just the far left, it's the independents and a lot of Republicans who also feel like the whole system has been rigged against working class and middle class folks.
Okay. But is the wealth tax, if I had to bet serious money on it coming out next week, should I bet serious money on it coming out next week?
If the question is whether it will be introduced, I think you should feel confident betting as much as you'd like.
I'm a wimpy better. Okay. I took my shots.
I wanted to ask about HB 1296 being resurrected, and which version you think might end up moving forward between 5181 or 1296 concerning student rights or parents' rights. You're probably aware Let's Go Washington filed a second initiative yesterday because 1296 was resurrected, and the suggestion is that...
I'm sorry, can you explain resurrected?
Well, 1296 didn't pass out of committee, but then you guys went back and...
No, that's not true. It passed out of committee.
It followed the
It
same.
followed the same process.
My understanding was 5181 was going to be the one that moved forward.
That was never decided.
Oh,
we I think in every media availability where we've talked about these packages, we've communicated that the House and the Senate were both interested in policy. We're scheduling the bill from Senator Wilson in the House. I understand 1296 is being heard this week in the Senate. So I think what we've said in the past is consistent with what's happening currently.
Okay. My other question is, there's a hearing this afternoon on one of Senator Wilson's bills, SB 5296, dealing with juvenile offenders and encouraging alternatives to incarceration. Do you anticipate that's going to move forward? There's a lot of resistance from Republicans to that bill because we've had so many juvenile offenders that go into the diversion programs, and then it often doesn't work. So I wanted your take on that bill.
I understand the bill's been scheduled for a hearing. I think we're planning to hear the bill. So
yeah, I just know if I'm assuming you looked at the bill. There was some other legislation about this, but yeah, the hearing's this afternoon on that one. But I didn't know what your thoughts were on that piece of legislation. If you think that's a good idea.
Well, I mean, obviously the Senate moved the bill. I've not looked at the bill, so I don't have an independent opinion of it. The hearing will be one of the things that helps, I think, determine how it moves forward, when it moves forward, if it moves forward. So, well, you know, this is just like my earlier response, step by step. You have a hearing, you hear the feedback, and then you move from there.
Follow up on the parents' rights changes, just because both of your chambers have passed legislation on this issue. Do you have any sense of what the possible changes to it could look like? Because 1296 does include a bit more than 5181. So do you have any sense right now of just like what evolution the bill or bills could be taking?
Yeah, I think luckily in my communication regularly with Senator Wilson, we've been in close communication about how the discussion in each chamber may look different structurally. I have a lot in one bill, and the Senate had a number of bills that covered many of the same topics, maybe with a different approach. We're in close communication on how our chambers have felt about those policies and try to stay as aligned as we can. These are difficult bills, as you have witnessed. They take a lot of time on the floor. There's a lot of conjecture and misinformation circulating them, much from the opponents who seem very interested in causing confusion and upheaval rather than really talking about what's really happening in schools and how students are impacted by the learning environments that they find themselves in. And so we're going to stay in close communication about that. To answer your question directly about the changes, I don't know that there's a whole lot of daylight between where the House members and the Senate members are, but we do have to stay in close contact with those folks who run schools so that whatever we do pass can be implemented. And so that's some of the conversation that we're currently having.
I would just throw in addition, that the Senate passed Senate Bill 5179, which is also about sort of enforcement and oversight of these rights. And there are good conversations, I think, going on about whether that bill could be added to 1296 as it's considered. So there are lots of possibilities about how things could work out.
Yeah, that's a really good example. Senator Wilson and I have been talking about the different components and you know, just the maturations of the way those policies will pass our respective chambers, but also ultimately to the governor's desk for approval. You might have noticed that the parental rights portion of my bill is identical to Senator Wilson's bill as a result of those conversations, and the kind of accountability and reporting portion in my bill is just specific to the policy in 1296, whereas Senator Wilson has taken a much more robust approach to that because she's been working on this for a number of years. And so those will come into alignment at some point.
And previously, I think I remember in a past media avail, one or all of you mentioned trying to get those changes to the governor's desk soon. You still putting the hustle on this? I guess, like, how quickly are you anticipating moving this along?
Yeah, for a bill that takes time on the floor, we got to make sure we can pass it at a time when we can do that and still get the work done that the people in our state expect us to do in other spaces of the budget and policy making. So the timing is not always in full control, but yes, it still remains a priority to get to the governor's desk.
I have a budget question, if we can go back to that. Senator, you brought up, and maybe we can hear from Senator Levitt as well. Senator, you brought up the clouds, the dark clouds. Senator Gildon this morning said, also brought up the uncertainty coming from the federal government. And he said that's an example why we shouldn't tap the rainy day fund or increase taxes. We haven't seen your budget yet, but that's definitely been discussed. With that uncertainty, why not take the more conservative approach to prepare for those storm clouds?
Do you want to take this one?
I'll jump in a little bit. I'll just go back to my town hall that I had this weekend. I mean, the people that were showing up were incredibly concerned about cuts to basic services like the ability to access health care, the ability to keep our schools open. And with all of the federal uncertainty, what I was hearing back from my constituents was to ensure that we had progressive revenue in place regardless of what happens with the revenue forecast or what the federal government sends our way or anything else. I mean, I live in an area that's very close to the Canadian border. I have a lot of seniors in my district, and the turnout was really seniors who are worried about their Social Security. They're worried about their ability to access health care. And I think as a state, we have to be able to show up and say we're prepared to meet those needs as best we can given the economic climate that we're in.
Progressive revenue, is that just another word for taxes, or what are we talking about?
Progressive revenue is taxes, but it is specifically taxes that are trying to rebalance our tax code so that we're no longer the 49th best in the country, where low-income and middle-income people pay a disproportionately high percentage of their income to support state and local government. And instead, it is more fairly, that burden is more fairly shouldered by all income strata in the state.
Drew, as you might guess, I take a public health perspective when I think about the rainy day fund. So the rainy day fund is there, and it's named the rainy day fund for when it's raining. It's raining. And from a public health perspective, you never do something like say, a worse disaster is going to happen, so we shouldn't try and get in front and address the current problem that we have. Let's just wait for a worse disaster to come. That is not the way you prepare for emergencies. The way you prepare and address emergencies is when you know you're in one, you address it, you try to take care of it, and you know that another one may come, but by addressing the first one, you're in a better position to address the next one. You don't just wait for the absolute worst to happen before you start doing anything. That's a disastrous approach.
Can we take that, John Stang make a bet on the rainy day fund then being a part of the budgets?
Anybody can bet that there is nothing off the table. Nothing.
On that note, how do you find the balance then, given that you're in the first year of a second Trump term, you guys will be back here in 2 years, questioning again, even if Congress, or Democrats take control of Congress, there will still be a Republican in the White House. How do you find that balance in not fully declaring rainy day fund now, knowing that in 2 years you could be back in the same type of situation?
Well, one of the things is we have to balance the budget over 4 years. So we are taking into account in the Economic Revenue and Forecast Council, who's forecasting, will give us some of their insights today in terms of their forecast. So we can plan on, we are planning over a 4-year period. There will likely be things that happen with the Trump administration that we are not aware of now, that we will have to take into account in the future. They wipe out Medicaid across the nation. There is not a state in this country that can backfill that in any way, shape, or form. That is disastrous for the health care and the health and the survival of millions of people in this country, including hundreds of thousands here in this state. So we have to work to make sure that that doesn't happen, and that's what part of our town halls were about this weekend, people recognizing that, and take all the action that we can to make sure that that doesn't happen. If it does, we're in a whole new land that we've not been in before, ever, anyone. So we can't prepare for every bad thing that'll be done there. We have to take the information that we've got and do the best planning that we can with it. Right back to my public health analogy.
Thank you.